When Shaquille O'Neal finally hung up his basketball shoes in 2011, many people thought they'd seen the last of Big Shaq in the spotlight. They couldn't have been more wrong. The man who had dominated the NBA courts for nearly 2 decades was just getting started on his second act. Standing at 7'9" with a personality just as large, Shaq never did anything small. While many former NBA stars struggled to find their footing after retirement, Shaq hit the ground running. He wasn't just a basketball player who happened to be famous, he was a businessman with a vision that stretched far beyond the three-point line. By 2023, 12 years after leaving the game, Shaq had built something remarkable. The average fan had no idea just how deep his business empire ran. Sure, people saw him on TNT's Inside the NBA, cracking jokes and breaking down games with his former rivals turned friends. But that television gig was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, Shaq owned over 155 Guys Burger restaurants across the country. He'd invested in Google before most people even understood what the company did. He owned car washes, fitness centers, and even a movie theater. When he saw that police in his hometown couldn't afford new cruisers, he didn't just write a check. He created a foundation that helped law enforcement agencies nationwide. What made Shaq different wasn't just his business sense, though. It was how he carried himself. In a world of celebrities who took themselves too seriously, Shaq remained the same goofy, approachable giant who'd once shattered backboards and rapped about Kobe Bryant. He danced with fans on TikTok. He stopped at car accidents to help stranded motorists. He bought furniture for struggling families when no cameras were around to catch it. The kids who grew up watching him dominate in Lakers purple and gold were now adults, showing their own children videos of Shaq being Shaq, both his monster dunks and his Halloween pranks on his TNT colleagues. 3 generations of fans now claimed him as their own. Unlike some athletes who desperately clung to their playing days, Shaq had evolved. He'd earned his doctorate in education. That's right, the man was technically Dr. O'Neal because he believed in the power of learning at any age. He'd become a reserve police officer because he believed in giving back to communities. He'd launched a line of affordable shoes for kids because he remembered what it felt like when his mom couldn't afford the expensive brands. What the public saw was a success story. What they didn't see were the late nights, the failed ventures, and the lessons learned the hard way. For every successful business, Shaq had faced rejection and setbacks. But he approached these challenges the same way he once approached double teams on the court, with determination, creativity, and an unshakable belief in himself. That's what made the attack so surprising when it came. Shaq had critics throughout his career, people who questioned his free throw shooting or his work ethic. But this was different. This was someone trying to tear down not just the player he had been, but the man he had become. A prominent sports reporter had published a piece that didn't just question Shaq's business moves, it mocked them. It painted his ventures as vanity projects, his TV work as clownish, and suggested that his entire post-NBA life was somehow a disappointment compared to his basketball glory. The reporter clearly expected Shaq to respond with anger, maybe even with the kind of unhinged rant that would generate clicks and views. After all, Shaq had always been known for his big emotions, whether joy or frustration. What the reporter didn't understand was that the Shaq of 2023 was playing chess, not checkers, and he was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the big man's intelligence. On the other side of this brewing storm was a man who had spent his career climbing the slippery ladder of sports media. Tom Wilson wasn't always the sharp-dressed reporter with the perfect hair and rehearsed smile that viewers now saw on their screens. He had started like most journalists, hungry, idealistic, and ready to tell honest stories about the games and players people loved. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. Maybe it was the pressure of getting clicks in a dying industry. Maybe it was watching younger reporters with less experience but more social media savvy passing by. Or maybe it was just the bitter taste of reaching middle age and realizing he hadn't become the next big sports anchor he'd always dreamed of becoming. Whatever the reason, Tom had discovered something that worked for him: controversy. His first taste came after writing a piece questioning a beloved quarterback's commitment to the game. The article wasn't particularly insightful, but it was mean enough to get attention. His editor noticed the spike in traffic. "This is what gets eyes on the page," he told Tom. People love to see giants fall. And just like that, Tom found his formula. Each takedown article got more attention than the last. Each TV appearance where he spoke hard truths about athletes led to another invitation. The pattern was simple: find a successful sports figure, question their achievements, suggest they were overrated, and watch the outrage machine do its work. "I'm just saying what others are afraid to say" became his catchphrase. But those who knew him from his early days recognized the act for what it was: a performance designed to keep him relevant in a world that threatened to move on without him. By 2023, Tom had become known as the hitman of sports journalism. Players avoided his interviews. Coaches gave him one-word answers at press conferences. But none of that mattered as long as his articles got shared and his segments got watched. When he first set his sights on Shaquille O'Neal, it seemed like the perfect target. Shaq was beloved, successful, and everywhere. Taking him down would generate the kind of buzz Tom craved. Plus, unlike active players who might refuse to talk to him afterward, Shaq wasn't someone Tom needed access to for his daily reporting. "This is the big one," Tom told his producer one night over drinks. "O'Neal thinks he's untouchable. The guy sells everything from car insurance to pizza to shoes, and everyone acts like he's some kind of business genius. But come on, he's just trading on his name. Without basketball, who is he really?" The producer looked uncomfortable. "You sure about this one? Shaq's pretty well respected across the board." Tom waved away the concern. "That's exactly why it'll work. Nobody questions the guy. They see him goofing around on TV and think he's just this lovable big man. But I'm gonna ask whether all this business stuff is just smoke and mirrors. Is he really involved, or is he just slapping his name on things while other people do the work?" What Tom didn't mention was how desperately he needed this article to land. His last few pieces hadn't generated the buzz he'd come to depend on. His editor had hinted that they were looking for fresh voices. At 38, Tom was already feeling like yesterday's news in an industry obsessed with youth and novelty. He spent weeks gathering ammunition, though research might have been too generous a term for what he was doing. He cherry-picked old quotes from business partners who had split with Shaq. He found unflattering financial figures from ventures that had struggled during their early days, ignoring their current success. He dug up ancient criticisms from Shaq's playing days to suggest a pattern of laziness that must surely extend to his business dealings. The truth didn't matter as much as the narrative. And the narrative Tom crafted was simple: Shaquille O'Neal, the business mogul, was a myth that needed busting. Tom Wilson would be the one to do it, no matter what facts he had to ignore along the way. What Tom couldn't possibly know was that this article wouldn't just be another notch on his controversial belt. It would be the beginning of the end. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning in October. Tom had chosen the timing carefully, early in the NBA season when basketball talk was picking up steam, but before the games became truly meaningful. The perfect sweet spot for maximum attention. The headline alone was designed to cut deep: Shaq's post-NBA career, a cautionary tale of overextension. The subheading twisted the knife further: how a basketball legend traded greatness for gimmicks. Tom sat at his desk, coffee in hand, watching the view counter tick up on the website. His editor had given the piece prime placement on the homepage, complete with an unflattering photo of Shaq looking tired during a business meeting. The image had been cropped to remove the context that Shaq had just finished running a charity basketball camp for underprivileged kids before heading straight to the meeting. "And we're live," Tom whispered to himself, hitting the share button to post the link to his social media accounts. The first comments started rolling in almost immediately. The article itself was a masterclass in what modern media had become: light on facts, heavy on opinion, and perfectly crafted to make people angry. Tom had broken it into sections, each attacking a different aspect of Shaq's post-basketball life. In the section on Shaq's TV work, Tom wrote, "While his colleagues offer insightful analysis, O'Neal has turned one of basketball's premier shows into his personal comedy hour. One wonders if he understands the game as well as he can throw a punchline." The section on Shaq's business ventures was even more cutting. A jack of all trades, master of none, except perhaps self-promotion. Sources close to several of his business deals suggest O'Neal's involvement is often superficial at best, absent at worst. What Tom called sources were mostly second-hand quotes taken out of context or comments from people who had never actually worked directly with Shaq. But those details were buried deep in the article, long after most readers would have stopped reading and started sharing. By noon, the piece had been picked up by several major sports news aggregators. By 2 o'clock, it was trending on Twitter. A rival sports network even featured a segment debating Tom's points, giving the article even more oxygen. "You've really stirred the pot this time," Tom's editor said, stopping by his desk. "The engagement numbers are through the roof." Tom allowed himself a small smile. This was exactly what he wanted, to be at the center of the sports conversation, to have his name rolling across the tickers at the bottom of TV screens. What he didn't expect was the text from a former colleague who now worked at TNT. "Just a heads up," the text read. Shaq saw the article. He didn't say much, but the look on his face. "I've never seen him like that." For a brief moment, doubt crept into Tom's mind. He had written hit pieces on plenty of athletes before. Most responded with angry tweets or press conference rants that only gave his work more attention. Some ignored him entirely. But something about this warning felt different. He pushed the thought away. Shaq was just another target, and this was just another day in the content business. By evening, the article had taken on a life of its own. Sports radio hosts were reading sections on air. Former players were weighing in, most defending Shaq and questioning Tom's credibility. Online, battle lines were being drawn between those who saw the article as a needed reality check and those who viewed it as a cheap shot at a beloved figure. That night, as Tom scrolled through the reactions on his phone, he got another text from his TNT contact. "You might want to prepare yourself. Word around the office is that Shaq isn't going to let this one slide. And he's not coming at you the way you think." Tom tried to shrug it off, but sleep didn't come easily that night. He had wanted attention, and he'd certainly gotten it. But as he stared at his ceiling in the dark, a thought kept nagging at him. What if this time he'd picked the wrong giant to try to bring down? Meanwhile, in his Miami home, Shaquille O'Neal wasn't ranting or raving. He wasn't firing off angry tweets or calling his publicist. Instead, he was making phone calls, calm, purposeful phone calls to people who knew the truth about his business empire. People who had been waiting for a chance to set the record straight. By Wednesday morning, the article had exploded across the sports world like a bomb. People couldn't stop talking about it, not because it was particularly insightful, but because it was so unexpectedly harsh. It wasn't just criticism, it felt personal, as if Tom had some kind of grudge against the basketball legend. Social media was on fire. Fans posted old clips of Shaq's generosity, like when he bought a laptop for a struggling college student he met randomly at an Apple store, or when he paid for a stranger's engagement ring he overheard the man worrying about at a jewelry counter. "This is the guy Tom Wilson is attacking," one viral tweet read, showing a compilation of Shaq's charitable moments that had been caught on camera. But there were also those who jumped on Tom's bandwagon, people who'd been waiting for someone to expose a successful black athlete. Their comments in the article's section revealed more about themselves than about the subject of the piece. The crew at TNT's Inside the NBA couldn't ignore the elephant in the room during that night's broadcast. With Shaq's empty chair conspicuously sitting there, he had been scheduled for a business meeting unrelated to the controversy. His colleagues didn't hold back. "I've known this man for decades," said Kenny, adjusting his glasses with barely contained anger. "I've seen him build his businesses from the ground up. I've watched him sit in meetings asking the kind of detailed questions that would surprise people who only know his public persona." Charles was less diplomatic. "Let me tell you something," he said, pointing at the camera. "This hit piece is nothing but jealous garbage from a nobody who couldn't shine Shaq's shoes. I'm not even going to say his name because that's what he wants, attention. But I know Shaq and I know business, and let me tell you, that man works harder now than some of us did when we were playing." Ernie, always the voice of reason, tried to steer the conversation back to basketball, but even he couldn't resist adding, "I just think it's worth noting that the article doesn't contain a single direct quote from anyone who's actually worked closely with Shaq on his business ventures. Not one." The show's defense of their colleague only added fuel to the fire. By Thursday morning, morning shows were debating the article, with hosts divided on whether it was fair critique or character assassination. Through it all, Shaq remained silent. No tweets, no Instagram posts, no statements through his publicist. This was unusual for a man who typically shared his thoughts freely. His silence made people nervous, both those who supported him and those who had jumped on the criticism bandwagon. Tom Wilson, however, was anything but silent. Riding the wave of attention, he appeared on 3 different sports talk shows on Thursday alone, doubling down on his claims and adding new, even more biting commentary. "Look, I'm just asking the questions others are afraid to ask," he said on a popular morning show, leaning back in his chair with newfound confidence. Is Shaq's business empire really as solid as people think? Is his analysis really adding value to basketball coverage? These are fair questions. What Tom didn't know was that in a downtown office building, Shaq was sitting with a small team of people, not publicists or image consultants, but actual business partners and financial advisors who had worked with him for years. They weren't crafting a defensive statement. They were methodically assembling facts, figures, and evidence. "You sure you want to go this route?" asked his longtime business manager, a woman who had been with him since his Lakers days. "You could just ignore this guy. In 2 weeks, everyone will have forgotten about it." Shaq looked up from the documents spread across the conference table. "This isn't just about me," he said quietly. "It's about every athlete trying to build something beyond their playing days. It's about every kid from where I came from who needs to see that success doesn't have to be temporary." He picked up a folder containing verified financial reports from his various businesses. "And it's about truth. This guy didn't just stretch the truth, he ignored it completely." Across town, at a trendy restaurant where media personalities gathered, Tom was enjoying his moment in the spotlight, accepting backslaps and congratulations from colleagues who marveled at his bravery. His phone buzzed with an invitation to appear on national television the next morning, his biggest platform yet. "See? This is how you make a name in this business," he told a younger reporter who looked at him with a mixture of admiration and unease. "Sometimes you have to be the villain." Little did he know that in the world of villains and heroes, his story was about to take an unexpected turn. Friday morning came, and Tom Wilson was riding high. 3 days after his article dropped, he was sitting in the guest chair on Sports Morning America, the most watched sports show in the country. The perfect platform to cement his status as the brave truth-teller of sports journalism. "So you stand by everything in the piece?" asked the host, a respected veteran who had interviewed everyone from presidents to Olympic champions. Tom straightened his tie and nodded confidently. 100%. "Look, nobody wants to be the one to question a beloved figure like Shaquille O'Neal. But that's my job, to look past the public image and ask the tough questions." Even though many of his business partners have come forward in the last 2 days disputing your claims, the host pressed. Tom waved his hand dismissively. Of course they're going to defend him publicly. That's how these relationships work. But my sources tell a different story behind closed doors. The interview continued for 15 minutes, with Tom growing more and more comfortable in his role as the fearless critic. By the time the segment ended, he was practically glowing with self-satisfaction. His phone was already buzzing with messages from friends and colleagues who had watched. What Tom didn't know was that across the country, in a production studio, Shaquille O'Neal was putting the finishing touches on something that had never been done before. At exactly 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time, across all of Shaq's social media platforms, which together reached over 50 million people, a video appeared. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was something far more devastating. A methodically crafted, fact-based dismantling of Tom Wilson's entire article, point by point. The video began simply, with Shaq sitting at a desk, looking directly into the camera. "I don't usually respond to critics," he began, his deep voice steady and controlled. "Throughout my basketball career and my business career, I've let my work speak for itself. But when someone publishes falsehoods that not only attack me, but could discourage other athletes from pursuing business opportunities after their playing days are over, well, that deserves a response." What followed was a masterclass in setting the record straight. Shaq didn't just deny the claims, he systematically disproved them with hard evidence. For the claim that he was just a figurehead in his businesses, Shaq played video testimonials from his actual business partners, not anonymous sources close to the deals, but real people with names and titles who detailed Shaq's hands-on involvement in everything from product development to marketing strategies. For the accusation that his restaurants were failing, Shaq displayed the actual financial reports showing year-over-year growth, alongside documentation of the hundreds of jobs his businesses had created in underserved communities. For the suggestion that his TV work lacked substance, he showed clips of NBA coaches and players praising his basketball insights, alongside ratings data showing how viewership increased during his segments. But the most powerful moment came near the end, when Shaq addressed Tom directly. "Mr. Wilson, journalism is supposed to be about truth. You had every opportunity to call me, to talk to my actual business partners, to verify your claims. You chose not to because the truth didn't fit the story you wanted to tell." Then came the knockout punch. Shaq played a series of clips from Tom's previous TV appearances, clips showing him praising Shaq's business acumen just 2 years earlier, calling him a model for athletes transitioning to the business world. The contrast between those old clips and his recent attacks left no doubt about Tom's lack of integrity. The video ended not with anger, but with something more powerful, a challenge. "I've spent the last 20 years building businesses that create jobs, opportunities, and products that improve people's lives," Shaq said, leaning slightly forward. "I've made my mistakes along the way, plenty of them, and learned from each one. That's what business is. That's what life is." He paused, his expression serious but not angry. "So my question to you, Mr. Wilson, is simple. What have you built besides a career of tearing others down?" And with that, Shaq nodded once and the screen faded to black. The entire video was 23 minutes long, comprehensive enough to be thorough, but concise enough to hold attention from start to finish. Within minutes, it was already going viral in a way that few things ever do, not just spreading, but resonating. Tom Wilson was in the middle of dinner with a network executive when his phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, he ignored it. This dinner could lead to his own regular segment, maybe even his own show someday. But when the executive's phone also began lighting up with notifications, Tom felt the first twinge of unease. "Excuse me," the executive said, glancing at his screen. His expression changed instantly. "You might want to check your phone." Tom picked up his phone to find dozens of messages, all saying variations of the same thing. Shaq had responded. And it wasn't good. "I should probably watch this," Tom said, trying to sound unconcerned. The executive was already signaling for the check. "Yes, you should." By midnight, Shaq's response video had racked up 5 million views and was climbing fast. It wasn't just spreading through sports channels. Mainstream news outlets were picking it up, entertainment shows were featuring clips, and social media couldn't get enough of it. #What have you built was already trending worldwide, with people applying Shaq's devastating question to all sorts of situations beyond the original context. What made the video so powerful wasn't just Shaq's celebrity status. It was the calm, factual way he had responded. There were no insults, no name-calling, no low blows, just verifiable facts and a powerful closing question that cut to the heart of not just journalism, but how people choose to spend their time on this earth. By Saturday morning, everyone from high school basketball coaches to business leaders to Hollywood celebrities were sharing the video with their own comments about the importance of building rather than destroying. "This is what integrity looks like," posted a famous director with 20 million followers. "Required viewing for my business students this semester," wrote a professor from Harvard Business School. "I'm printing that last question and hanging it in my office," added a tech CEO known for mentoring young entrepreneurs. Former NBA players who rarely agreed on anything found themselves united in support of Shaq. They shared stories of his behind-the-scenes generosity and business advice that the public had never heard before. "When I was struggling after retirement, Shaq called me out of the blue," wrote one former player. "He didn't just offer encouragement. He connected me with financial advisors, invited me to sit in on his business meetings, and showed me that our value doesn't end when our playing days do." The most damaging responses for Tom came from other journalists, respected veterans of sports media who called out his article for failing to meet basic journalistic standards. Opinion masquerading as reporting, wrote one Pulitzer Prize-winning sports writer. No direct quotes from primary sources, no evidence of attempts to verify claims, no opportunity given for the subject to respond. This isn't journalism, it's a hit job. By Sunday, the video had been viewed over 30 million times. Cable news channels were running segments analyzing not just the content, but the way Shaq had chosen to respond, with facts rather than fury, with evidence rather than emotion. Meanwhile, Tom Wilson was nowhere to be found. His social media accounts had gone silent. He had cancelled a scheduled appearance on a Sunday morning sports show. Rumors spread that he hadn't even shown up to his office on Saturday. The network executive who had been dining with Tom when the video dropped released a brief statement. "We at Sports Network believe in accountability journalism that adheres to the highest standards of reporting. We are reviewing the concerns raised about the recent article." What had started as a hit piece meant to generate clicks had instead become a cultural moment, a public reckoning about the difference between criticism and character assassination, between tearing down and building up. On Sunday night, Shaq returned to the TNT studio for the first time since the controversy erupted. The producers had prepared a segment about the video, but Shaq surprised everyone by asking them not to focus on it. "That's done," he told them before they went on air. "We've got basketball to talk about." When the cameras started rolling, Charles couldn't help himself. "Man, you broke the internet this weekend. That video was." Shaq just smiled and shook his head. "Let's talk about these rookies. Did you see that kid from Duke last night?" And just like that, Shaq did what truly confident people do. He moved on. He had said what needed to be said, and now he was back to building rather than dwelling on those who tried to tear him down. But for Tom Wilson, moving on wouldn't be so easy. The clapback heard around America was just beginning to reshape his world, and not in the way he had hoped. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of Shaq's response continued to spread through the media world and beyond. For Tom Wilson, the consequences came swiftly and without mercy. Monday morning brought the first official blow. The editor who had enthusiastically published his hit piece called Tom into his office. The conversation was brief and to the point. "We're retracting the article," the editor said, not quite meeting Tom's eyes, "and publishing an apology." "You can't be serious," Tom protested. "Since when do we back down because a celebrity gets upset?" The editor slid a folder across the desk. "This isn't about him being upset. It's about this." Inside were emails and documents from 3 of the anonymous sources Tom had quoted in his article. All 3 claimed they had either never spoken to Tom or that their comments had been taken wildly out of context. "This isn't journalism, Tom. It's fiction." By that afternoon, the website had replaced Tom's article with a formal retraction and apology. "This article did not meet our editorial standards for accuracy, fairness, and thorough reporting," it read. The TV appearances that had been lined up for Tom throughout the week were cancelled one by one. The network executive who had been considering him for a regular segment stopped returning his calls. Former colleagues who had congratulated him just days earlier now pretended not to see him in the office. But the professional fallout was just the beginning. What really stung was watching how Shaq's question, "What have you built besides a career of tearing others down?" had struck a chord that went far beyond sports media. Teachers were using the video in classrooms to discuss media literacy and the difference between criticism and bullying. Business schools were analyzing it as a case study in reputation management. Parents were showing it to their kids as an example of how to stand up for yourself with dignity instead of lowering yourself to an attacker's level. 2 weeks after the video dropped, a major university invited Shaq to deliver a guest lecture on business ethics and personal brand building. The auditorium was packed with students eager to hear from someone who had successfully transformed his career multiple times. During the Q&A session, a student asked the inevitable question, "What made you respond to that article the way you did, instead of just ignoring it?" Shaq thought for a moment before answering. "There's a difference between hearing criticism and being lied about," he explained. "Criticism helps you grow. I've had coaches, teammates, and business partners give me tough feedback throughout my life, and I'm better for it. But when someone spreads falsehoods that could hurt not just me but other athletes trying to build something meaningful after their playing days, that's different." He paused, then added something that would be quoted in business books for years to come. Success isn't just what you build. It's also what you choose not to tear down along the way. The lecture was live-streamed and watched by over 2 million people, including Tom Wilson, sitting alone in his apartment, his career in shambles. Meanwhile, an unexpected outcome of the controversy was the surge of interest in athlete-owned businesses. Investors who had previously been hesitant to back athlete ventures were now looking more closely at these opportunities. Other sports figures reached out to Shaq for advice on their business ideas, knowing he took the responsibility of representation seriously. 1 month after the video, a group of retired athletes announced the formation of a business development program specifically designed to help players transition from sports to entrepreneurship. They named Shaq as their first honorary advisor. As for Tom Wilson, he eventually found work at a small blog covering local high school sports. The pay was a fraction of what he had made before, and the audience was tiny compared to his former platform. But something unexpected happened as he sat in the bleachers watching teenagers play their hearts out, with no agenda other than to fairly report what he saw. He rediscovered why he had wanted to be a journalist in the first place. One day, after writing a thoughtful piece about a local coach who had transformed a struggling program, Tom received a short email that simply read, "This is what building looks like. Keep going." It wasn't signed, but he knew exactly who it was from. The story of Shaq's Clapback eventually faded from the headlines, as all stories do. But its impact endured, a reminder that how you respond to attacks can be more powerful than the attacks themselves, and that in the battle between tearing down and building up, the builders will always have the last word.